Hey everyone, it's Nemesis Dave Howard here, and thanks for watching our podcast where we're talking about the Bela Lugosi classic from 1931, Dracula. And to break it up a little bit, as part of Cinema Crusaders Halloween movie madness this month, we're also talking to horror creators, a variety of different ones, and we're kicking off with the guy that I first met at Long Beach Comic Con almost 2 years ago. He's a great interview, a great creator. Absolutely wonderful to talk to. But first, I'm going to introduce my co-host before I introduce our guest here. He's new to Comic Crusaders. I'm really looking forward to having him here with me. None other than the Bard. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on? CBR the Bard on the check-in. How's the audience? Good to see you guys.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for you to introduce this guest to you. He is a wonderful writer. He's written Bettie Page for Dynamite Comics for a while. He also writes Elvira. He does an Apple podcast where he reads Pulp Fiction, which is absolutely wonderful. You got to check that out. Because I love Pulp Fiction and mystery. He does that as well. Absolutely incredible. I am so honored to have him on the pod. David Avallone. How are you doing, David?
Thank you, David. That's all very, very kind of you to say.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And so let's get right into this interview because we got a lot to talk about.
Wait, can I say one thing about Dracula, the 1930s Dracula movie?
Absolutely.
Because I know that's your topic. Here's the craziest thing about that movie. I used Dracula as the villain in Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, issues 1 through 12. Very much not like the movie Dracula. But I was doing research on it. Bela Lugosi played Dracula in movies exactly 2 times. Do you know what the second one was?
Was it Son of Dracula?
No, you'd think that. You'd think it would have been some sequel. It was 20 years later or 15 years later. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is the only other time Bela Lugosi played Dracula. Is that or is that not crazy?
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, Frankenstein? Because Bela Lugosi is like a legendary Frankenstein. Yeah. He's what Frankenstein was to Lon Chaney's Wolfman.
Yeah.
Well, he also did. We did an interview with a gentleman who did a graphic novel biography of Bela Lugosi a couple weeks ago. And it was interesting because for the research for that interview, we saw that he did all sorts of bits that the studios made him do. And there was one where it was so funny. Bela Lugosi is trying to seduce Betty Boop. So he's you have booped your last boop, so type thing. So
is it like a Roger Rabbit thing where she's a cartoon and he's Bela Lugosi? Or is there a Bela Lugosi cartoon?
No, it was the actual voice actress for Betty Boop. So
okay.
It was on there. So, yeah. So they were doing that. Which was funny because we learned during that interview, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but it's always interesting that he had a torrid love affair. He met the actress, and I can't remember her name, who was the inspiration for Betty Boop in San Francisco. And so they had a love affair for 3 months.
Nice.
So, yeah, so very interesting. So, let's get right into this. Let's talk about what's going on. So your current project that's out right now for Dynamite. You already mentioned you did Elvira, Mistress of the Dark 1 through 12. Great series. I loved it. But then you did Elvira meets Vincent Price.
Yes.
Yeah. What I know that the Bard had this question, but I'm going to kind of steal his thunder, but let him follow up on it.
Don't do me like that.
I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to go to the Bard. Go ahead, and we were talking a little bit about this. What were you thinking about with this? Go ahead and kick it off.
So
here.
I'm enjoying Elvira meeting Vincent Price. Of course, you have Elvira with her favorite film from Price's catalog as The House. Self, I rock with Bucket of Blood. What would your preference be?
Mine is Theater of Blood, which is the one where he plays an actor named Edward Lionheart, who he doesn't get a prestigious acting award that he's expecting from this tribunal of critics, and he starts murdering them one by one in ways that are inspired by Shakespeare plays. And it was actually Vincent Price's favorite movie of his own. So actually, in the comic, his sort of, there's that thing where he changes physical appearance depending on what Elvira is thinking about or what anybody is thinking about. His basic appearance that you see the most in Elvira Meets Vincent Price is the character from Theater of Blood. The black cape with the red lining, and he's a certain age, and he has a kind of flamboyant mustache and all that. So it's but yeah, that's my favorite. I do love House on Haunted Hill. That's another great one. I even like his when he broke in, they didn't quite know what to do with him. And in 1946, 47, he does a film noir called Laura. And in that, he's kind of like the useless, sexy gigolo guy, which is hard for people who only know him from like Roger Corman horror movies to imagine. But that was kind of the parts he was getting.
Trying to be Richard Gere before Richard Gere, huh?
Yeah, kind of. And then there's this one movie he does. It's kind of a gothic soap opera called Master of Dragonwyck or Dragonwyck. I can't remember. And that's kind of a romance where he plays like a rich weirdo in a castle in upstate New York. And I always feel like that's where the Vincent Price persona that you see in so many of his other movies, that was kind of the first time he did it. Where he's playing a demented, lonely weirdo who makes everybody's life difficult. But yeah, Theater of Blood. If you haven't seen that one, definitely check out Theater of Blood. Diana Rigg from the original Avengers TV series plays his daughter in it. It's great. I couldn't recommend it higher.
So with Vincent Price, choosing him as the character to go along inside Elvira, how did that process work? Was there anybody else you considered, or was it always Vincent Price?
I had some other ideas. I actually, because of what I was doing at the time, I said we could try Bettie Page Meets Elvira, since those were the two books I was writing simultaneously. But Elvira and the Vincent Price estate actually have the same management. And they suggested Vincent Price, and I thought, well, that's fantastic. I would be so thrilled and honored to write Vincent Price as a character in a comic book. So it came from Elvira's manager, actually. And I hadn't thrown much out. They said, we're thinking about doing a team up. And I said, we could try Elvira meets Bettie Page. And they said, how about Vincent? And I was like, that's a fantastic idea. So, and then I've told this story before, but it's weird how the world works. The day that I was supposed to come up with a pitch for the series, a comic book writer and editor named Val D'Orazio, I think she was on Twitter at the time, tweeted out a link to a blog she had just done about this infamous lost Vincent Price movie called The Ares Computer. It literally has an IMDb page, and it doesn't exist. It was never made, it was never shot. And I was reading her blog, and I went, well, wow, you just handed me the plot to this thing on a fucking silver platter. The legendary lost Vincent Price movie from 1972 that never got made. So I made that the premise of the whole series. And because it was called the Ares Computer, I sort of wanted to mirror that. Ares is the ram. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what does that suggest? And the first thing that popped in my head, in the 1970s, there were so many horror movies that were about like ancient prophecies about how the world was going to end in the 70s. We're lucky. It didn't actually happen. I was there. World didn't end in the 70s. But there were a million movies about it, like The Omen and that kind of thing. So I thought, so the movie should be one of those movies. And then I've got the ram. And my Egyptian mythology is not very strong, but I know that Amun-Ra has a ram head. And I was like, okay, so Amun-Ra's my bad guy, and his consort Amunet is sort of the villainess, and it all went off from there. And also, I wanted to, as much as possible, feather in references to all of Vincent's movies. Yeah, not all. He made way too many movies for me to do that. But as many of Vincent movies as I could possibly do. So like you read issue 2, the whole sequence in the house is Fall, the House of Usher, with a lot of Abominable Dr. Phibes thrown in, you know. So it's nice to be able to pick and choose from his stuff, and you know.
I will say that I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, and steal scenes and, you know, rework them a little bit and all that.
I also love how it tied back to your original Elvira, 1 through 12 as well, because you had a lot of her jumping around and meeting different horror characters through there. So she's kind of taking this trip, that's continuing here. You were sharing with me. Is it okay to share that about the issue, the 5th issue?
Oh yeah. That's
okay.
I think that's already been solicited in previews. So yeah,
okay.
there will be a 5th issue. The story of Amun-Ra wraps up in the 4th issue, and then there's sort of a 5th issue epilogue, which may lead into yet another Elvira series that I'm writing, which has not been announced anywhere. I'm waiting to see if they like the pitch that I sent in. Cassandra is usually pretty gung-ho and on board with what I suggest, so I'm hoping she goes for it.
Cool.
I wish it was the old days where I would be writing my 25th issue of Elvira, but because everybody likes issue 1, everybody buys a first issue. I've got 1 through 12 of Elvira. I got 1 through 4 of Shape of Elvira. We got 2 Kickstarter specials, and there's a 3rd one coming up. And then there's 5 issues of Elvira meets Vincent Price, and then there'll be another 5-issue miniseries after that.
It's like
so when the time clears, it'll be like 35 Elvira comics I've written, but it won't be Elvira number 35, which is too bad.
You got to renumber everything, unfortunately, all the time.
Yeah, legacy numbering.
I think the inside front cover of, I might be wrong, I might have put this joke somewhere else, but the inside front cover of, I think, Vincent Price #1 says, "This happens after the events of the Omega Man, which happens after the events of the Shape of Elvira, which happens after the events of Elvira, Mr. the Dark 1 through 12. I just go out and buy the trade paperbacks, and you'll be caught up."
What? Do you have a question you want to ask there, Bart? Bart, go for it. You have anything else you want to ask?
I was just wondering if you were going to do Elvira meets LaVey or versus LaVey. Who else would you want to see in a team up with Elvira? Because I like to see her, get down when that time LaVey be pulling people up from the grave.
It's funny that you mentioned LaVey, because he there was a little touch of his philosophy in the last 4 issues of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I had a coven of male witches, and I think they quoted him at one point or another. So he's kind of threaded in and out to this stuff. I don't think I would actually use Anton by name. I would probably come up with an analog, a variation on him. But there are some other, I don't know that I can say, because the projects actually might happen someday, but other people have been suggested and have come up. It's just a question of getting the rights and getting everybody on board with it.
I'm curious if
you can name drop right now.
Could I name drop anybody right now? Trying to think of what I've pitched and what is okay. Yeah, not really. I'm afraid I can't. Like, none of it is approved enough for me to even say out loud.
See, I would be curious if.
Okay, not trying to get your money.
As a straight man, Elvira meets Alfred Hitchcock, maybe, or.
It's kind of funny you should say that.
I'm not suggesting anything, but Dark Horse.
You know what? I'll get this out there, and maybe it will get back to the right people.
Yeah.
The next Elvira series that we're doing, if we do it, is just going to be Elvira. It's not going to be a team up, though she will, I guarantee you, meet some famous people in it.
And
one of them might be Alfred Hitchcock, by the way. That's kind of, I kind of pitched that.
Okay, so that's a fact.
But the one that I most want to do, honestly, and it involves making a kind of difficult show business deal, is I want to do Elvira meets Swamp Thing.
Ooh.
I think that's like the most obvious joke. They both had big moments in the late 80s in terms of their popularity. And I would set it during the Alan Moore run on Swamp Thing.
Maybe a John Constantine pop-in?
Oh, literally my main reason for wanting to do that comic is so that she can annoy John Constantine by calling him Sting in every issue. Listen, Sting, I don't want any more nonsense.
That
I
would be great.
really want to write her calling him Sting and Gordon Sumner and policeman and all of that kind of stuff, because I think that would be fucking hilarious.
Bart asked
yeah.
a great question. I don't think I've ever asked you this either. How did you meet Cassandra? How did you meet Elvira?
I got the gig. Joe Rybandt, the editor-in-chief of Dynamite, was out in LA, and he said, "Let's have dinner." Great, love Joe, love having dinner and drinks with him. And he brought it up. He said, "Would you like to? We're having trouble finding a good writer for Elvira. I think you'd be great for it." I said, "Let me think about that," because having just done Bettie Page for a year and change, I was like, do I really want to be typecast as like the throw a sex symbol at me and I'll turn her into a comic character? Not to forget, she had done DC Comics. She was in 166 issues of Claypool. But I knew I was going to want to do something different. So I thought about it and said yes, largely because both my wife is a huge Elvira fan, and she's like, you're taking it so that I can meet her. And the artist on Elvira 1 through 12, Dave Acosta, also a huge Elvira fan, which we had never talked about. And he kind of told me, he said, you're thinking about it as a horror comic, and it's a comedy comic with a horror, genre background. Mm-hmm. But the goal on every page isn't to scare people. The goal on every page is to make them laugh, surrounding that with a scary envelope. So, so I worked, mostly my contact with Cassandra in the beginning was I would send scripts and she would send them back with a couple of notes, and we'd communicate through email. And then in 2020, when the pandemic shut everything down and Dynamite wanted to do a Kickstarter, they said, Cassandra really likes your writing and she wants to be more involved. She'd love to talk to you about what the Kickstarter is going to be. And we talked, and she had some ideas and I had some ideas, and we kicked them around. And we decided on one of my ideas, which was the pandemic thing, which is the Omega Man. Kind of a joke. And it's hard to make a joke about a pandemic and COVID. So it's really more about how foolishly some people reacted to COVID. I think you haven't read it yet. And it's
no, I gotta find it. I gotta pick it up. So
the gag in the Elvira, in the Omega Man, is that she's locked down from the pandemic. She can't get to a hairdresser, so she overdoses on hairspray and goes into a coma. And when she wakes up, Los Angeles is deserted except for orange-skinned zombies. And
did she accidentally drink any bleach trying to do her hair?
You're close. She finds out that the zombies got that way because an influential public figure convinced them that they should drink a cleaning product to get rid of COVID. And it mutated them into these orange zombies called the Sudsies, because the product is Dr. Sudsy, which is a laundry detergent. So anyway, that's the Omega Man. We worked on that together. She had some great suggestions about it. And then we had met a couple of times at signings where she would do a signing and I would swing by to say hello and all that. And then the next Kickstarter that hasn't been announced yet sort of combines Cassandra's life story with Elvira's life story and kind of pretends they're the same thing. It's specifically meant to celebrate her 40th anniversary playing the character.
Wow.
And I said, I really want this to be as based on your autobiography as much as possible. And she hadn't put it out yet. And I said, should that be a phone call? And she said, oh, no, honey, we got to have drinks in our hands while we're having this conversation. So about 3 months ago, my wife finally got her wish. And the three of us went and had drinks and dinner at the Dresden Room. And I listened to her tell about her amazing life and career for a couple of hours and adding all of it into the comic book.
Wow,
so
that's amazing.
Started with emails to phone to now, now we see each other in person every now and again.
I completely understand about the wife thing, by the way. I'm being honored to be able to interview Cassandra later this month. And my wife informed me, she didn't ask me, she informed me that she's taking a day off school. She teaches school, to say hello to Cassandra. So it was
sure. No,
But,
she's a living legend, and you know,
I was
and
shocked.
an amazingly kind, funny, smart person.
This whole time I thought that she was just Elvira, like, you know, from watching the movies, and like I remember seeing her at a Not Scary Farm when I
Sure.
went, and I was like, yo, like her name's just Elvira, like she's like
Yeah.
Cher.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I didn't know that that was like a character.
Yeah, you
know what I'm saying?
She was 30 when she got that gig. And she had
Well,
been, if you read her book, she was a showgirl in Vegas when she was a teenager. She met Elvis. She's in a Bond movie for a couple of seconds. She's in a Fellini movie for a couple of minutes. You know, she went to Italy and fronted a rock band. Like, she's had an amazing, amazing, amazing life even before she auditioned to play the part of Elvira. I mean, she created the character, but they were looking for a horror host. I'm trying to remember the name of the real guy. Scary Seymour. Something Seymour was the horror host that had passed away and they were replacing. And she came up with Elvira, and it's an amazing character.
I also have to say, she did the TV pilot back in, you know, right after the movie, which I think is incredible.
You can catch it on YouTube, by the way. I always recommend. Yeah. I also recommend people who are enjoying Elvira Meets Vincent Price. They met in the real world. They were good friends, and if you go on YouTube, you can Google Elvira Vincent Price together, and you'll see their like talk show appearances. He is so obviously delighted and charmed by her, and he's her hero since childhood and all that. So it's a really great relationship, and that's what I was trying to bring into the comic.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, humbly, I would say that I think you write her very well. I know you get feedback from Elvira, but it always feels authentic. You mentioned the Kickstarters. I also wanted to mention the one that you have that I know has been funded now, and actually let me bring it up real quick so I can just show it to everybody. The Wrath of Khan, is coming.
Yes,
and that is following up on Omega Man, which we talked about.
I mean, it follows chronologically. It will follow Elvira Meets Vincent Price in this storytelling universe, but it's a direct sequel to Omega Man, because she's appearing at a San Diego comic book convention called Pop Culturama. I didn't want to use their real name in case anybody wanted to lawyer up. And she's being honored as the Queen of the Cure at a special event at the convention. But it's really I've been going to conventions since 1979, since I was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me an excuse to write about the experience of being at conventions and being a fan at conventions and who you run into at conventions and what kind of people. And I asked permission from at least 4 or 5 of my friends who are, you know, the kind of celebrities you run into at a convention. So it's got a lot of cameos of famous and semi-famous people who are the kind of people you run into on the convention floor, because I wanted it to be as authentic to that experience. I wanted people to read it and go, oh yeah, I've seen, I saw a panel with that guy. I've seen that guy in Autograph Alley. You know, I've run into these people. So yeah, it's also kind of about, with everything that's happened in the last few years, it's about, and all of us who do this for a living are absolutely aware that we do it because the fans exist and buy the comics and care and show up and come to signings and register their love. We've also seen a darker side to fandom in the last 5-6 years. And this is kind of about that, about both sides, and how ultimately the bright side of fandom way the hell outnumbers the dark side by a lot. And I want to sort of celebrate those people.
I think everybody who's on, I was going to say, I think everybody who's on social media has seen that nastier side of fandom. So,
yeah,
you know, which
well,
I
always say, you know, when all this stuff came out about The Last Jedi, and I don't care if anybody liked it or didn't like it. Doesn't mean anything to me one way or another. I'm not Ryan Johnson. But the thing that struck me the most, again, being the age I am, I was 15 when The Empire Strikes Back came out. In the present day, we think of The Empire Strikes Back as the best one, the universally beloved Star Wars film that everyone agrees is the best one. That was not what people were saying in 1980. And there was a minority of fans in 1980 who were like, it's only half a movie. It doesn't have an ending. They killed Han Solo. No way Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. Ew, Luke kissed, like it's just so much not. But in 1980, that was 3 letters to the editor in Starlog magazine, and that was it. Even if that represented 20,000 people or 100,000 people, you didn't hear from 100,000 people. You saw a couple of letters to the editor in some sci-fi fan magazines, and then you and your friends had whatever opinions you had. So there's a way in which the way the world is magnifies the negative, and people on Twitter magnify. And I find out that's, and sometimes I'll find myself replying to like some Comicsgate chud or whatever. And, again, I apologies if this sounds braggy or whatever, but it's like, sometimes I'll look at the troll I'm replying to and the dude's got 5 followers. And I'm like, if I reply to this dude, I'm exposing him to the 11,000 people that follow me. I'm making him famous. Why on earth would I do that? This is a guy who his voice would never be amplified if I don't amplify it by calling him an asshole. So actually, the smart move is to do what you've always done and just ignore and move on. Now, that's not true of the bigger name trolls who already have a lot of eyes on them. Those guys need to be slapped down every time they poke their heads out of the gopher hole. And I'm here to do it, and I'm happy to do it. But there are times you just go like, why would I even acknowledge this nonsense?
And I may be naive, but I'm looking forward to that time when all of us in, geekdom, whatever you want to call it, can get back to, I like what I like, you like what you like. And sometimes we can have good-hearted discussions, vigorous debates over beer, over, who's the better Jedi or whatever. So
I will never understand. There are two things I will never understand in fandom. One of them is beyond fandom, and that is being offended that someone doesn't love the shit that you love. It's all personal, man. And it depends on, like, Diamonds Are Forever is one of my favorite James Bond movies. Is it the best one? Fuck no. But my dad took me to see it on a double feature with You Only Live Twice when I was 8 years old. And it was one of the best days of my life. And I had a great time. And I love my dad. Diamonds Are Forever will always carry that.
Well, the song was great too. So I just have to say.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not a. I actually will defend it as a good movie. But my point is, we all bring things to art that are 1,000% personal to us. Mm-hmm. I'm watching Ted Lasso right now. I started therapy for the first time at 49 years old, and my therapist was a heavyset Black woman. So there are things about Ted Lasso's run right now that are very fucking personal to me, and it may be great even if you didn't come to therapy reluctantly late in life. It may still mean something to you, but it has an extra kind of thing, and we should all be. You like a thing I don't like? Cool, man. Like it. Yeah. I don't care. And the second thing is the whole, this later version of thing ruins the early version of the thing that I love. I always say this joke that, like, in 2009, I was assured that Chris Pine was going to come to my house and shred my William Shatner DVDs, and it never happened. Nobody took my childhood away from me. Like, it just, however you might feel about that movie in 2009, it has zero effect on pre-existing Star Trek that you loved or hated or whatever. I went to see Man of Steel, I think on opening night at the ArcLight in Hollywood, and there's this huge record. There used to be this huge record store, video store across the street of it from it called Amoeba. And I was you know what? Today's the day for me to buy Superman the movie on Blu-ray. Now that I've sat through that, I think I want to clear my palate by watching a good Superman movie. So, Superman the movie got 20 more bucks of mine after I've already seen it 1,000 times. I'm like, no, now I need to own it. Now that's out there in the world.
Spider sense is tingling that a bunch of Zack Snyder fans have been triggered now out there. So.
Hey, I'm not gonna let it show. I mean, come on, I'm not gonna let it show.
No, and again, it's like you want to love Zack Snyder, cool. That doesn't offend me. I don't happen to like his movies. It's fine. Yeah.
I absolutely agree, and I mean that's the way we are at Comic Crusaders too. It's like it's all about enjoying what you enjoy, and it's like, and you can critique stuff without being an a-hole, like you were saying.
Yeah.
It's like there's a difference. There's a difference between honest critique or criticism and just being a jackass. So
there's also, I would also factor into that the whole punching up versus punching down thing. I will make fun of Zack Snyder till the cows come home. And part of and Tarantino for that matter. And part of the reason for that is I can't hurt them. there is nothing I can do to, like, those guys aren't going to lose a single nickel or moment of their career because I don't like their movies. You know what I mean? But some indie creator makes some horror movie that I think is a piece of shit. I'm not going to talk about that. I'll talk about the stuff that's great. I'll talk about the stuff that I love and I'll promote it to people. But I don't think this is as true for fans. I think professionals, you have a responsibility to, be at least a little bit, polite to your colleagues and your peers. And I think it's deeply unprofessional to shit all over your colleagues and your peers. Absolutely. And it's that thing of like, even me making fun of Zack Snyder movies or Tarantino movies is like, if I leveled up my career 2 more steps, I would probably also stop doing that. Definitely. Because it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. And in private, buy me a drink at the Bayfront in San Diego. I'll tell you everything I hate. But on Twitter publicly, it doesn't do anyone any good particularly.
So I guess the last thing I wanted to ask is one of the things that you've started doing fairly recent, you've been doing it for a while, but it's a fairly recent thing is you've been talking a lot about your father's pulp mysteries and doing a podcast about it. Have you ever thought about writing that kind of stuff yourself? I know that we talked a little bit behind the scenes because I've got a book coming out and I would love to see what you could do with that. So
I'm, not to sound too lazy, but prose is a lot of work compared to the amount of time it takes me to write a comic book. Writing a short story or a novel is a whole other investment in time. And honestly, right now, the amount of comic book pages I have to turn out between here and Thanksgiving, there would not be any time to do any prose. But it is a thing that's interested me, and it's in the idea of adapting some of my dad's work into the comics field has also been of interest to me. There's some complicated things with the rights there that I would have to iron out, but it is something I've thought about, and I've even thought about. I think my father intended me to a certain degree to continue his work, and in too early and ahead of the curve, he died in 1999, and the last book in his Ed Noon detective series actually introduces a character based on me. And the character based on me walks in on the last page of this book, which is called Since Noon Yesterday. And I actually did a web series adaptation of Since Noon Yesterday from the perspective of the character that's off screen the whole story. Sort of like it's the parallel version of the story. It's the son trying to find the main character, and and at the end it dovetails. Never got a chance to finish it, and it's that thing where I was doing it in 1999 and 2000 when like maybe 5% of the country had broadband. Like I didn't have broadband, so I couldn't watch my own web series. Like I had to like watch it at 56K. I don't know if you guys remember 56K modems, where it would take you like an hour and a half to download a JPEG. Streaming video was like in its infancy, but I've been really frustrated with the indie film scene in the 90s, and I thought it was the place indie film was going to go. And I was right, but I was about 5 years, like this is before YouTube. So like it was just, the world wasn't quite there yet. And I may go back to that and go back to that series someday.
That's almost surreal that the last page of the last book has the character based on you walking in.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think he was pretty keen on me continuing the legacy. And I will mention, last year I did a piece for an anthology called Nightmare Theater, which was put together by Clay Adams and David Schrader. Big book. It was a Kickstarter book. I don't know if they should be selling it through Diamond. I don't know when they're going to do that. But I used it as an excuse to do an 8-page pilot, for want of a better word, for a series that I've wanted to do since I was a little kid, which is based on something of my dad's. Not something formal. The quick explanation is, when I was a kid, my dad's a World War II veteran, and he's a novelist. And, I thought everybody's parents did this, but apparently it was just my father. When he told me the classic bedtime stories, the Grimm's fairy tales, Perrault's French fairy tales, all that stuff, Little Red Riding Hood, Rumpelstiltskin, Jack and the Beanstalk. He told me all of those stories as World War II combat stories about himself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they didn't have any kind of narrative through line, but it was just like, and he told it to me, these stories to me, in the voice he used as an author, his own voice. So imagine like a hard-boiled private eye telling you a bedtime story, but it's, machine guns and tanks and Nazis in the Black Forest in 1945. If you think of like Little Red Riding Hood in the classic version ends with the huntsman kicking down the door and killing the wolf. In Dad's version, it was his reconnaissance squad kicks down the door and he machine guns the wolf with the Thompson, and that's the end of the story. And so I did an 8-page version of Hansel and Gretel as a World War II story starring my dad, and it's in Nightmare Theater Anthology. And I have that out with a big comic book company now that I pitched it to. So I'm hoping I get to do that series. The Hollywood thing of when you're pitching something, you combine two things that people know. I always like it when the two things sound like they couldn't possibly go together. So when I pitch this, I always say it's Saving Private Ryan meets The Princess Bride. And they go, what?
It also very much reminds me of that Pan's Labyrinth, that movie.
Yeah. No, there's a bit of that feeling to it, where that's what that movie was about, superimposing, fairy tales on 1940s fascist governments. So it works. It's a similar feel. But that's something else involving my dad. And the main character is named Sergeant Michael Avallone, and I actually, because my dad was a writer and he chronicled this stuff, the names of the guys in his squad are the actual names of the guys in his squad in the comic. Like, they all had great names, so I was happy to use them. And he told me about them, so I know what their characters were like.
Wow.
It's really of all the stuff that I've done, it's really a labor of love, and I'm hoping that I get it out there.
I'd love to read that. That sounds really, really great. Before we wrap this all up, I want to give my co-host an opportunity. If you have any other questions for David, shout them out. So,
I currently do not, David. I'm listening to everything that you got. I really think it is interesting that your dad left you that last page basically to continue the story. And, it would be something that I would pick up if you did continue that story. And I don't even read pulp like that. At least not in the
Well, thank you.
traditional. Yeah, not in the traditional novel sense.
Sure.
If it was adapted into like a graphic novel, I would definitely pick that up. And I'm looking forward to the next issues of Elvira meets Vincent Price, and my best to you and your works.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you so much as well, David.
My pleasure.
I have to apologize. Have I been mispronouncing your last name? Is it Avallone? Not Avallone.
Yeah.
Okay. I am so sorry. I should have asked beforehand. So
It's quite all right. I don't even bother. The Italian pronunciation is closer to Avallone, but that's a lot of work for Americans, and I default to Avallone. That's
okay.
Close enough. I blame Sylvester Stallone for the fact that no one pronounces my name right, because he pronounces his name like he's Irish, and that's why everyone thinks that's how Llone gets pronounced.
Okay. He anglicized it. So,
yeah.
Well, I do want to thank you very much for coming on. Always great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to having you back on for some new stuff if you're willing. When
absolutely, anytime.
Great. And once again, I want to thank all of you out there watching. Please pick up Elvira Meets Vincent Price. Look for the Kickstarter, Wrath of Khan. I'm going to look for Omega Man because I want to pick that up as well because I'm collecting all the Elvira stuff. I absolutely love it. Look for Bettie Page, which is absolutely fantastic as well. And I wish you all the best in the future. And
thank you, sir.
Great. So thank you, everyone. I want to say for Comic Crusaders, the Cinema Crusaders, I want to say bye to everyone. And we're out of here. Thank you.